and there's those that continually have a tax write-off, I suppose. Okay? So the question becomes, what's the difference between those that make it and those that don't? So they start looking at these records and they try to determine, well, where's the smoking doing? Well, we go through the best management practices. We start looking at all the things our livestock specialists tell us we need to be doing. We need to have this tighter calving window. Okay, everybody's pretty well getting their calving percentages about the same. The weaning average is not that much difference. There's a little bit of difference here that shows up in the pounds of beef weaned per exposed female, but that 60 pounds doesn't make up for that $150 swing, okay? So what does matter? Well, we start seeing some differences when we start looking at feed costs, okay? This doesn't surprise anyone here. Those that are making money in that time period, they had a feed cost per cow for the year of $146. Over here, we had a $265 per cow feed expense, okay? This is where we start seeing the differences. We also look at the amount of stored feed. Look at the difference in stored feed. So here we're looking at more grazing, less stored feeds. Okay? These are things that we've heard. These are things that many of us do believe. Grazing is going to beat out stored feeds. I just wanted to kind of stick that back in our face. This is a chart from Iowa State where they looked at these expenses, and this is a probability chart. This is a prediction. What this means is for each of these topics, and this, what is this big piece of the pie here? It's feed cost. What this is saying is that 53% of the probability of profit and loss is explained by that one item. It's not that feed is 53% of total cost. It's that as a predictor. You tell me nothing about your farm except how much you spend on feed. I've got half the information I need to say if you're making a profit or a loss. It's that powerful. The next piece is depreciation. What depreciates? I like to think of all the shiny paint that cuts, rakes, bales hay, hauls manure, spreads it back out on the fields. When you take depreciation and combine it with feed cost, you've got 2/3 of the prediction of a profit and loss on a cattle operation. That's powerful. I think it's interesting to note the items that have little power in predicting profit and loss. This may be counterintuitive, but these are the items that have little impact on profit and loss. Calf weight, calf prices, weaning percentage, and my favorite, herd size. I meet producers that are they're in that making a profit one year, losing money one year, and they're just kind of getting it figured out. And the comment is always, boy, if I could just get a few more cows, I could get this thing profitable. Herd size doesn't do it. Okay? Working on these feed expenses is a good way to get going. That's the low-hanging fruit. Okay, so that's the things that we know. Now let me tell you some things you're not going to believe. This is an option. When this is on my home place, and in the past, when you'd pull up at the farm and see this, it was time for panic. Cattle don't belong in the grain field. This is a problem. No, this is planned. Here is a little single poly wire electric fence creating that day's allocation of grain for these cattle. The process is very simple. It doesn't take a lot of investment in equipment. Our favorite is a single strand of poly. It does require cattle that are respectful of an electric fence. They got to be broke to electric fence. Other than that, it works really good. Here, a neighbor of mine, Harry, we're spreading the gospel with a producer. Old Larry's doing this for the first time, and he planted about 15 acres of Milo, and we went over and started helping him with his allocations and got him started, and it worked out very well for him. Doing this allocation, we're taking smooth fiberglass posts and just pushing them in the ground. Maybe you drive them in with a little small post driver. There's your corners. We're cheap. We're buying Home Depot electric cord reels to roll poly up on. Works real good. And take a four-wheeler, drive down a path, and we create our fence. I used the word daily a minute ago. This is a daily allocation. I can tell you right now, if you're not interested in moving cows once a day, go do something else. This is not going to work for you. It requires daily movement. When I show you the dollars you're going to make for that 30 minutes of time, it gets your attention. Works well during the bad weather, the snow, a little freezing rain, works just fine. So this is what it looks like. We are going to give cattle an allocated area of Milo based on the grain that we want the animal to receive. A common place to start is 10 pounds of grain per cow per day. Okay? We go and make an estimation of grain yield, and from the grain yield estimation we know how big of an area we need to come up with that 10 pounds of grain. It ends up with a pretty dense looking stocking rate here, right? These cattle will come in, and this is pretty low yielding Milo in this example, and we still see how dense this is. This grain, you can produce somewhere between 400 and 500 cow days per acre. So there you go. If you had 400 head, each day you just give them 1 acre. 400 head on an acre is a pretty tight footprint. That's what it looks like. It takes the cattle about 30 minutes when you turn them in to consume all the grain heads. They eat the grain heads first. Once the grain heads are gone, they change their attention to the fodder leaves and then that top half of the stalk. It takes about 2 hours and they're done with it. Now the next day you're going to move them, but it only takes less than 3 hours and they've done what they're going to do. This poly wire is sitting here. They're in here now. Tomorrow we're going to move them over here. We're going to advance. That's what it looks like. 24 hours later, that's the residue that's left behind. Really good utilization. Now you can see the cattle have advanced over to the next segment. Did forage testing, and I've got a variety of forage tests to share with you. This was some after wheat Milo. You can grow full season Milo, or you can grow double crop Milo. When you grow double crop, you're going to find your grain yield is much less. Okay, you're going to be in my area. I could expect 35 to 45 bushels of Milo grain yield after wheat. The grain is the carrying capacity. That is the cow days. Okay, so the less grain yield, the fewer cow days we got. Nonetheless, when we start looking at nutritional value of it, we see crude protein in the 7s. Okay, this after wheat Milo TDN is lower than full season. That's 58. Okay. When we look at a full season, this is more common. Protein hangs around 7%, but TDN jumps up. All that grain makes a difference. That's just energy. Okay. When I look at the different parts that they're eating and I break it out and I don't make a composite sample, when I look at just the heads, so when I harvest just the grain heads and have that treated as a forage test, it's 8% protein on a dry matter basis and it's 77 TDN. Pretty good stuff. Still, we're going to call that protein deficient, okay? We're going to be supplementing protein. We'll talk about that. But energy is taken care of. Which is cheaper to supplement, protein or energy? Protein's cheaper to supplement. Right? We're going to grow all the energy we need right there in place. The leaves. I harvested just fodder leaves and created a sample. Same protein value in the leaves as there is in the grain. Now, a lot less energy, but still, there's good feed value in those fodder leaves. And when I combine all of this into a composite sample of what I see the cattle consuming, once again, it comes out with a protein level of about 7% and a TDN above 70. Notice when that sample was taken, February the 6th, okay? This grain is holding its feed value. We start grazing at the end of October, 1st of November, okay? And you can go as far through the winter as you would like to. I can tell you that after Valentine's, it's not a lot of fun. The frost has gone out of the ground, it's muddy, you're tired of moving cattle every day in the mud, okay? You're saving money, but to do this for a couple of months and then go, okay, that was fun, but let's move on. The feed value will be there. I have fed cattle just so I could say I did it all winter long. We grazed Milo till the end of March, and then we started back out on some pastures that were starting to green up. So you can do it. Now, just because you can don't mean you should, right? But you can. Let's go through some economics of this deal. I took the 2019 University Ag Econ Extension crop budgets, okay? And they had a crop budget for hay production. And there's some assumptions in their budget. They were assuming that you paid $40 an acre rent for the hay ground, that it was a fescue clover mix. The state average hay yield in that setup is a little over 3 tons per acre. And they came out with a total cost of production of $60 a ton. Okay? That's kind of low, but that was 2019 dollars. Okay, that's the Ag Econ number. Now we get into rusty math. We get into my math. Well, $60 a ton, I say that's $30 a bale. Okay? 1,200 pound cow, if you want to feed her 3% of her body weight per day, you're looking at 36 pounds of hay. You work through the math, and she's eating about $1 worth of hay a day. Does this pass the litmus test of common sense? Yeah, $30 a bale. About how long can you graze one cow on a bale of hay? About 30 days. Bale of hay a month per cow is a pretty rough, rule of thumb. Well, there we are, $1 a day. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, how many of us here have hay that they're willing to sell for $30 a roll? Anybody? What is a more common price for a bale of hay now? Where are we at?
60.
Closer to 60? I agree, I see that. When we get down here to $60, we're beyond $2 per cow per day. Okay? That's what you're spending on hay cost to feed a cow in the wintertime. Over $2 a head a day. And most likely you're going to need to supplement some energy. It's not uncommon to be feeding hay and a little shell corn. Right? Okay. Let's look at the dollars of raising Milo, grain sorghum. Same Ag Econ department. They've got all the expenses that go into producing this grain crop. Okay? What is an expense in their budget that we won't have? If we grow Milo and graze it, what expense are we going to avoid?
Harvesting.
Harvest. Did you know that 40% of their numbers for production cost is combine, trucking, and storage? 40% of the expense to produce Milo is that. We eliminated that. We replaced it with a little poly wire in 30 minutes of your time every morning. We won't let the cattle take it off for us. You might note that there's significant dollars allowed for fertility. When we're grazing that grain in place, where's the fertility? Somewhere on the farm. When you put bushels in a trailer truck and send it to the river, the nutrients were just exported, right? The same as if you sold a bale of hay off your farm, you exported those nutrients. That's just another small piece of this. Okay, one other piece of math. 120 bushel Milo is pretty common in my area. Not that hard to grow 120 bushel. Last year, I think we were around 150 at home. One year is different from the next. I use 120. A lot of times a person that's going to try this is probably not going to put it on their best corn ground to start with, and so maybe yield's going to be a little reduced. So I like to try to be real world about this and say, let's just shoot for 120 bushel yield. I need you to understand you got to put your grain farmer hat on. We're not growing a forage crop. We are growing a grain crop. The secret to this is in the grain. Without the grain, you don't have the carrying capacity. Okay? The feed is the grain. So we utilize chemical herbicides. We utilize good fertilizer practices. Keep the weeds out. Let the Milo grow. And it's not that hard to get that 120 bushels. So when you do 56 pounds in a bushel, there's 6,700 pounds of grain on an acre. Right? I've gone behind the cattle and documented utilization and waste, and I find that the cattle get about 80% of the grain in their mouth. There's some waste, there's some loss. Birds, deer, whatever, there's a little loss. So I'm using the number 75% utilization. I grew 6,700 pounds of grain. I'm using 3/4 of it. That leaves me with 5,000 pounds of grain in a mouth. If I'm doing 10 pounds per cow per day, that's 500 cow days per acre. Tell me, what idea would you have of an alternative crop that would give you 500 cow days to the acre? We could chop corn silage and get numbers approaching that, right? We're going to spend a whole lot more money chopping, bunking, feeding, hauling manure from corn silage. Okay, there's a lot of feed value here, and the cost are much reduced. So let's compare some things. If I say that I'm growing this Milo on some pretty good ground, and I need to go ahead and be realistic and give it $150 cash rent value, when I take the Ag Econ Department's cost of production and I remove the combine expense, okay? This is all of the production expense minus the combine and trucking. I'm down to feed my cattle for 80 cents a day. That's paying myself $150 cash rent. If you drop down in your land cost, you see what happens. We're down to 70 cents per head per day. And if we get apples to apples on land utilization, remember our hay budget was what? $40 per acre assumption. At $40 an acre, I'm down below 60 cents per head per day. So we're somewhere in this 60, 70, 80 cent a day range, depending on your land cost, compared to $2 and over feeding hay. It's real easy to see that we can graze Milo and we can do it for somewhere around half the feed cost of feeding hay. So what we're talking about is the single biggest predictor of profit and loss, that expense of winter feed expense, and I just showed you how to cut it in half. This is very strong. This is very powerful stuff. My neighbor, Harry Coate, many of you may know Harry. I picked this up from him probably 8, 9 years ago now. He had been doing it for the last 20 years, but he got it from our neighbor in Montgomery County, Bob Ridgely. Bob Ridgely doesn't get on a speaking circuit. Bob Ridgely doesn't do a whole lot but raise cattle. He's been doing this since 1994, I think, 94, 96. Every year, this is how he feeds cattle. It works. In that period of time, I'll go ahead and jump to some of the questions that usually arise. In that period of time, we've never had any health issues, feed problems, foundering, overeaters. Never had any issue with that. I think, and through conversations with livestock nutritionists, that the point that Milo is a little slower to digest is working in our favor. Corn is so much more readily digestible that you can really shock a rumen, shock a cow system This Milo is a little more gradual. That seems to be working in our favor. In any case, whatever the reason, we haven't had any health issues related to feeding grain like this. Now, here we've got a couple of livestock specialists, Daniel Mallory and Anita Ellis, and we're on Larry's farm. And so Larry is the guy that we went out to and got him started for his first time with this. And so Larry made a mistake that many first-timers make. What's on the ground?
Stalks.
Waste. He over-allocated. It's hard to believe that that small of a footprint is going to meet the nutritional requirements of your cattle. And the tendency is to give too big of an area. And when you do, you'll notice they'll eat the grain mostly and they leave the fodder and the stalk. So we want them to clean it up a little better than that. So when you make your first allocation, you'll pay attention. If your cattle have never grazed Milo before, they won't even eat it the first day. They walk up and down. Oh, they just walk up and down and look in going, well, what you want me to do here? But then eventually one of them will figure it out and boy, they take off. And then the next year they know what the score is. You can introduce new cattle, but as long as there's a few old girls in there that remember it from last year, everybody goes along really well. People say, okay, Rusty, this is great. We can save some money, but my gosh, I can think of a lot of reasons that this is just going to be a mess. Here's one. So when it rains every third day and somewhere around 40 degrees, yeah, you're going to have a mess. It's going to look like that. On the day that those cattle were standing here eating that, they had to stand somewhere. Where they were not is back over here in this pretty green pasture of mine. This is a crop field that in the spring, I'm going to pull a disc across it and plant soybeans. I'm done. I go and destroy permanent pasture, I've got a little bigger process of getting that back into shape, right? I don't get that excited here. I've got one producer in Pike County, he won't even perform tillage in the spring. He just no-tills his beans right into that. He says, you don't need tillage, Rusty, you just slow down with the planter. It works just fine. I still like to smooth mine over in any case. So in the wintertime, when everything is working as you would like, this is what she looks like. They just leave this checkerboard. Come springtime, when you're planting that field, I can tell you what the weather was every day in the previous winter. You can look at all those squares and know exactly what was going on. I want to throw out this one with you. We think about stover. Now this is changing gears just a little bit. Corn stalks, we removed the grain from that, okay? But don't miss out on the value of picking up some of this stover, some of this feed. But let's switch back to the Milo a minute, and let's get outside the box again. This is September at my place. You notice the cornfield back there, the corn's starting to dry down. Okay, this is the Milo field, planted on the back side of the corn. It's looking good. Okay. During the summer, I had intentionally planted more Milo than I was going to need for the coming winter, for the purpose of having summer graze. During the summer slump with the fescue pastures, I decided that's the beauty of the flexibility of Milo is pastures were getting short in the summer slump. Milo is just starting to make dough stage. Let's go graze it. Grazed it off, not even thinking that it was going to grow back. The growing point for Milo is below the soil surface. The growing point for corn is above. You green graze corn off, it's a one and done. Milo, this is what came back. Those cattle took, in the summer, that standing dough head Milo to the dirt. They will eat all of that stalk when it is green and full of juice, full of sugars. Dirt. and I was so surprised when it grew back. And so here we are, going and grabbing it one more time. It's almost like cheating. You almost felt bad about it, really.
How long did that take to grow back?
So this is September. So I mean, that's the amount of growth that I got from, you know, July, middle of July back to September. No additional fertility, just, you know, letting them graze it off. It even, part of this that I didn't, as we were grazing back through this, part of it actually made grain heads
Yeah,
again.
that's what it's gonna
Now, it was nothing to get excited about.
Yeah.
But you could find grain heads out
It
there.
would have been in the boot stage probably? The head would have been in the
Yes.
boot stage?
Yep, yep. So we were getting right back to grazing off a little bit of grain dough. I'm kind of liking, this was at the edge of field where a grass waterway, so this is a edge of field border is what this is. So there's a little grass, you know, you try to bale your waterways and make use of that grass, well shoot, we're just grazing it. Anytime we can take a machine out from between feed and a cow's mouth, I figure that's a good effort, right? Now, just look at that picture a minute and think about all that's going on. Corn's drying down. Here's our half the cost of hay, Milo, just waiting. No big hurry. I had some flexibility of doing some summer slump grazing. Does that cow look like she's hungry?
I like the way her udder looks.
You like that udder?
Yeah, I do, there's a lot of milk there.
Exactly. So we fall calf, and you know, peak lactation for our cattle is going to occur while they're grazing Milo. Man, they got a nice grain diet. They milk well. Calves grow well. I've noticed that the calves learn to graze the Milo with mama, and you'll see young calves kind of sucking on a grain head of Milo, and they start slowly figuring out how to get that off of there. And so they, on their own, transition themselves off of the milk and onto that grain. They really do well with it. I had mentioned that we go to Milo the end of October. This year was kind of goofy. I don't know about y'all, but I think we got our first killing frost last week. All right. We had some little frost. It was almost Thanksgiving before we had enough freeze to call Milo safe to graze. What are you talking about, safe to graze? Anybody understand the issue with Milo? Prussic acid. So when you have tissue injury, you have prussic acid formation, and we most commonly see that through frost injury. Yes, sir.
My son's run a lot of sheep this fall, what you're talking about. So when that first frost came, they took the sheep off the sorghum. They broke through the fence. In a couple hours, they were aborting lambs. They didn't lose any adults. They got a hold of that. The vet said they run out of oxygen, killed the lambs, and they aborted.
Well, I mean, I'm not a livestock person, but I understand prussic acid is an issue. I understand nitrate can be an issue as far as replacing on the hemoglobin the spot to carry oxygen. There's a lot to that.
I think that's what he said happened.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's not good. We stay off of Milo until we just plan the first of November to turn in. That normally gives me 2 weeks. We historically have a mid-October frost down there, and then by 1st November, we're ready to start grazing. It works out good. This year, it's been a little slower getting going. I've got a pretty good number of producers that call me regularly that are doing this, and every winter, that's the big question. Well, can I start grazing yet? No. And this year was really tough because they had planned, they've done this 2 or 3 years, and they really like it. And so, but this year, we just had to wait. You could go in and graze, but as soon as you were going to have a frost, you got to get them back out. And then you got to wait a week, 10 days, and then you can go back in. But in any case, so I'm going to start with a shotgun approach of different observations and share with you until we just run out of time. We have had historically a fantastic calving percentage. Okay? Very good, unexplainably good. 100% calf crops, that sort of thing. And as much as I want to pat myself on the back for being an excellent herdsman, I know there's gotta be more to the story, right? And you get lucky one year, but to repeat this and, you know, just keep that in the back of my mind. I read a livestock article one day that was talking about the benefits of getting cattle off of Kentucky fescue, infected fescue. And it said if you will get cattle for as little as 30 days off of fescue before the onset of breeding season, it has a significant impact in preg rates. Sound familiar, Jim?
Fall herds or spring herds or all of them?
Well, any herd that you get off of fescue prior to breeding is going to be beneficial, toxic fescue. So in my situation, Truxton is the town I'm from. That's where Harry's at. That's where I'm at. We're all over in Truxton doing weird stuff, and we just keep backing into wonderful discoveries. I didn't plan to get off of that for 30 days before breeding season, but we moved to Milo November 1st when I turned bulls in for, you know, Thanksgiving to the 1st of December, bulls go in. I didn't plan it, but I was creating a 30-day period off of fescue before the bulls went in. I think that had as much to do with the increased calving rates as anything. Now, another piece, a question that comes up is about the protein. And I get a smile on my face because we're all the same. And when I introduce a producer and they start this, I get the same, there's one question I always get, and it's the producer says, okay, this is working, and I'm supplementing the protein, but I want to grow the protein in place. Have you ever tried growing something in between the rows of Milo so when we graze the Milo, we can pick up the green and we can get the protein that way? And I smile because you can grow protein. Two things. Milo shades the ground. When you grow Milo in 30-inch rows, it is hard to get a cover crop to exist in there. We've flown on, done aerial applications, and Milo shades ground. Corn, you can do it. Corn starts drying down, leaves start falling, sunlight starts making it to the soil. You can do cover crops in standing corn. Milo, it's more difficult. The other piece is we've done some work with skip row planting. So plant 2 rows of Milo on 30, skip a row, plant soybeans there, then go back to 2 rows of Milo. So we do this skip row business. Okay, you can do that. You can grow some soybeans in there. But when am I trying to graze my Milo? It's a winter feed substitute, right? So you're not going to have this green soybean in there in the wintertime, okay? And the beans and the pods have started splitting and falling out. We have had very limited success with growing the protein in place. I admire everybody's desire to do that, but if you figure it out, let me know. There's a lot of people like to know how to do it. You're going to find that you absolutely have to supplement protein to your cattle. This is a protein deficient diet. Work with your livestock nutritionist. I think you'll find that you're going to need about 1/2 pound of protein per head per day. That's about the deficiency that you're going to be running in this system. You can stockpile fescue and go back and strip graze that in the winter in conjunction with grazing Milo, and you can pick your protein up through some grass grazing that way. You can feed some high quality hay as a protein supplement. You can pick it up that way. I find it is about as easy to take bean meal and bucket feed that out. When you got cattle that respect a polywire, protein doesn't have to be supplemented daily. Twice a week works. I take buckets of bean meal and dump it on the ground in little piles underneath the polywire. Cattle will line up like there's a feed bump, and they'll clean all that bean meal right up off of the ground there underneath that polywire. Works really well. No need for tubs or bumps or any of that. In fact, as far as protein tubs go, they work, but the convenience is expensive. It's probably the most expensive protein you can supplement is a tub, a lick tub like that. But it does work. But understand, the first 2 weeks that cattle are on this system, everything's looking great. If you're not supplementing protein, you'll start to notice the manure starts stacking up, the digestion starts slowing down, they're not getting out of it what they need, and you will have a train wreck. So there's two things I tell people. If you're not gonna move cows every day, and you're not gonna balance the diet with protein supplementation, please go do something else. Don't graze Milo, because it will not work if you don't do those two things. When you do it, I've seen quite a bit of success. This is where Harry was trying to do some forage sorghum, and he was interplanting some soybeans. So this was just trying to create a little smorgasbord for some summer grazing that was more balanced with plants that were in place. I have with me here a few copies I'll give you, but we have a guide sheet at the extension office. You can stop by and get one if you don't get one this morning. 4-page guide sheet that covers pretty much everything I just talked about here for the last half hour. Read through that. If you have some questions, my contact information is here. Give me a call. I love talking about this. I think I probably work with as many producers now outside of the state of Missouri as people in Missouri. My most recent one is a gentleman, John Lund. He's at Red Wing, Minnesota, and he wants to give this a whirl. So I'm working with producers in Michigan, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Illinois a little bit, and Tennessee. If you can grow Milo, this thing works. It really does. Yes, sir.
What about small ruminants?
Okay.
Hairy.
Small ruminants, the little woolies. So at home, my son has a flock of Katahdins. Harry's got a few hundred Katahdins himself. We have grazed Milo with sheep. Interestingly enough, with cattle, you have to give daily allocations. If you give 3 days worth of Milo to a group of cows, they're going to overeat the first day and starve the third day. Okay? That's the way the cattle are going to be. Sheep, you can give them 2 weeks worth. You can give them a month's worth. And they don't waste it, they don't overeat it, and they work around the perimeter. You give an area of Milo, sheep won't just go out in it the way cows do. It's kind of interesting if you want to get into animal psychology. I wonder sometimes, I don't know. I'm not a certified animal psychologist, but I like to think about it. A cow walks into a cornfield and she loses her ability to see. You know, cattle get a little flighty when they're in corn where they can't see out. But in the Milo, a cow stand there, they stay calm, they can see over everything. A sheep walks into Milo, it's kind of like a cow in a cornfield. They can't see the predators. They can't see around them. So they stay on the outside. Now that area of Milo will disappear, and it's just a little smaller polygon shape every day. They just work around the outside edges. I have found that there are sheep that don't like to graze Milo. And I'm sad to say my son's flock has turned into one of those. They just don't perform well on Milo grazed in the wintertime. There are sheep that do, and we got some that do not. So we have switched over to utilizing the Milo for the sheep as more of a summer green graze. But you can absolutely do this with small ruminants. Fencing requirements are going to be different, obviously. With cattle, I would suggest that you do 1 strand of poly and you set it high enough above the ground that calves can walk under it. Cattle are broke, calves are learning. And when a calf is learning about a single poly, they're going to tear it down and then the whole herd gets out. So leave it up high enough for the little rascals to walk under it. It'll tickle their back, they'll jump forward. They're not going to damage the Milo. I watch the calves. The mamas, it gets kind of hectic in there when you first turn them in, because remember, it's pretty tightly packed. The calves will just advance. They'll creep graze forward and just go lay down in a row middle and watch all the adults have at it. And then as the excitement comes back down, the calves will get up and they'll come back in there with mama, and they'll walk around and mouth on some of that. So keep your poly wire high enough to let the calves get under it. I like building enough poly allocations ahead of time on the weekend that working for the extension service during the week, all I gotta do is take 20 minutes and go roll up a poly. Roll it up, cows are standing there before daylight waiting on me, they know what the score is. And if you're an hour late, they're not happy, they're ready, and they go. Yes, sir.
Have you got anything on chemicals to use on the Milo for weed control?
So chemicals for weed control, pretty simple. I like atrazine and I like metolachlor. So if you start with a clean field, whether either through tillage or through a burn down with your favorite, you know, glyphosate, 2,4-D, whatever you're doing for a burn down. But then when I plant, I go right back over the top with the atrazine and the dual, and I'm done.
Atrazine and dual?
Yep, atrazine and metolachlor dual is one version of that. Yep. Use label rate. You don't have to go over. Just use a label rate, and normally that works out pretty good. You may have a little bit of issue. Cockleburr seem to be the one weed that tries to push through the chemical barrier later in the season. So keep an eye out for cockleburrs. But other than that, we plant it. You have to plant siphoned seed. Okay, so there's Milo seed that has it's difficult to buy Milo that's not siphoned is the word, but there's a coating on it that allows you to use these herbicides that I'm talking about. If you have naked Milo seed, you cannot use the chemical herbicide. So it's Princep coated seed. It's called siphoned seed. So when you see Milo seed, it has a reddish coating on it. That's siphoned Milo seed. But we plant the Milo. We turn it right around and spray it. Don't put it off. Spray it the same day you plant it. You can look at your watch and time Milo germination. It comes fast. And once it's up, you're going to have a hard time getting some of your sprays on it without injury. So plant it, spray it, and you're done spending money on Milo. We put the fertilizer down, plant it, we spray it, and I'm done spending money. Now, what is the, from a physiological maturity quality of hay, what month of the year for us is the best month for quality of grass to be made into hay? You don't want it too mature, but we want to have a little tonnage there, so it's always a trade-off, forage quality and forage quantity. May, month of May, turns out to be when our cool season grasses are usually in their best shape to be made into hay. What month of the year do we get the most rain out of all 12 months? May. So in May, when your neighbors are scurrying around, worrying about trying to get hay put up before June, okay, and it rains in the forecast, I'm just smiling. Because when it rains, I'm growing my winter forage. It's right there in place. I have done soil testing to look at, do I even need to add fertilizer next year? Because remember, we got all the manure still on the farm. Yeah, it's going to take a few years. You start seeing a positive increase in your fertility levels, but it's not a 1 year and now you no longer need to apply fertilizer. So stay on your soil test. Animals will move fertility around depending on your water source and how much you back graze, strip graze some pastures. So the fertility is still on your farm is the way I look at it. It's not on the boat to China. It's still on your place. You bought it, you kept it. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So far as the grains, you got the red Milos and the yellow and the white. Do you prefer one over the other?
So I like the red Milo. That's I believe what they call the bird resistant Milo.
Okay.
It's a high tannin content Milo. I would encourage you to look for a seed that has good stalk strength rating in the seed catalog, because remember, we want this to stand all winter. The most yield and the most grazing days you're going to have is that first day you start grazing. After that, there's a little less every day, either from birds, deer, stalk falls over in an ice storm or snow or wind or what have you. So we're looking for good stalk strength. I like a more compact head, so it's not going to catch so much snow and not pick up so much weight that way to snap over. So outside of that, red Milo, tight head, good stalk strength, and then just look and see what's a good grain Milo. Don't mention to your seed dealer that you're going to graze this. His brain will switch to a forage Milo, a forage sorghum. not what we want. You wanna grow grain as if you were gonna get in the combine and cut it. How we on time, John?
You're doing okay. We got time for 3 or 4 more questions. If
How many head per acre did you say?
So that depends on you and how well you grow grain and how heavy you want to supplement your cattle with grain. 120 bushel Milo and you got 5,000 pounds of grain out there. If you want to do 10 pounds per head starting out, there's your 500 cow days. I have found that you'll start increasing that a little bit. The colder it gets in the winter and what have you, and the calves start getting bigger, you'll start upping that. And so you'll go to 13 pounds per head per day, and you'll go to 14 pounds per head per day. So you're banging in there somewhere around 400 cow days to the acre. Still fantastic. Okay? One of my best success stories was right off of the bat. There were some articles written last year about him. A producer down near Sedalia. He called me up one day because there's some YouTube videos out on this that I've put together. And he called me up and said, I saw this stuff and I'm curious about doing this. I wanted you to know I planted some Milo and I'm ready to start grazing. He said, now is this really going to work? I said, well, sure it's going to work. And he said, okay. I said, well, by the way, how many cows you going to feed on this? He said, 400. I said, okay then. Well, let's, I actually made a visit to his farm just to make sure he didn't make a mistake. He planted 100 acres of Milo, going to feed 600 head of cattle, and he ended up backing it off to 400 head, and it was a tremendous success. I put a lot of money back in that man's pocket. He added it up. He said, you know, if I normally unroll hay bales. He said, I spend half a day unrolling hay. He said, this takes less than 30 minutes. I got a lot of time. Whether you got 30 head or 300, it's going to take you the same amount of time to feed cows every day. It's crazy. You got 100 head, you're going to spend 30 minutes. How much do we save per day per cow? $1. You stuck a $100 bill in your pocket every morning, you can get on the four-wheeler and go move that polywire. That's pretty good wages. I'm out of time.
Well, couple of points. You didn't mention the percent of body weight. I'd always heard on grain on cows 0.5% of their body weight as a target is, and that looked like about what you were shooting for with that 6 pounds.
I guess that kind of comes in there. Yeah.
Also, the figures I've seen, your cost per day is about the same as stockpile tall fescue, okay, but on a lot fewer acres. 3,000 pounds of dry matter forage, which is kind of a middle of the road yield on stockpile fescue, that's going to be 75 to 100 cow days per acre, and you're getting 500. But I wanted you to comment just a little bit on the unique physiology of the Milo plant, where it doesn't dry down senesce like corn.
Oh, that is interesting. You know, somebody pointed out to me one day. They said, you know, corn dies, Milo gets killed. There's a difference. Corn will dry down, leaves drop down, it'll senesce down, starts pulling moisture out of the grain, it starts drying down, getting ready for harvest, for shelling, right? Milo's green till the frost killed it at Thanksgiving. So all the sugars, all the sap still in that stalk. You can go out while you're grazing this browned over Milo from winter, take a pair of pliers and squeeze juice out of it. You look at the contents of that juice, there's some sugars in there. Those cattle enjoy those stalks. They don't like that bottom 1.5 foot of it. It's pretty tough stuff there. But that upper half, there's good feed in there. And it is interesting, just the difference between corn and Milo in that respect. Yeah, good point.
Okay, thank you all for your attention and your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'll be around a minute or two if somebody wants to talk further. Very good. We'll get out of the way for the next one.
Many of the people recreational